My brother made my life unbearable, then got my wife pregnant. Now, after being disowned and left out of our parents' $2 million inheritance, he's begging me for help. My younger brother David had always held a deep grudge against me. If you assume it was due to jealousy, you'd be mistaken. He was the golden child, not me. Our mother adored David, catering to his every need, while I was left to fend for myself. She cooked his meals, did his laundry, and constantly reminded me that, as his older brother, I should be helping him. Meanwhile, I never received the same treatment. I had always been independent, and maybe that was my mistake. I never expected anything in return. David never once offered help when I needed it, only seeking me out when he wanted something. I was the quiet, bookish type, while he was loud and boisterous, much like our father. I was also brutally honest, never sugarcoating my words, which I suspect made my mother see me in a negative light. Despite being the family favorite, David took pleasure in making my life miserable. He mocked my height, teased me for wearing glasses, and repeatedly invaded my privacy. He would sneak into my room, read my journal, and then report everything to our mother, twisting my words to make me look bad. Whenever I confronted him, my parents dismissed my concerns, laughing it off as harmless sibling antics. But it was far from harmless. He nearly broke my glasses, tampered with my food, and even placed small stones in my cereal. Thankfully, I noticed before I broke a tooth. My mother refused to discipline him, insisting that this is just how brothers bond. As we got older, his cruelty escalated. He sided with my school bullies, calling me an ugly loser, and encouraging them to torment me. One day, during a petty argument, he looked me straight in the eye and told me to kill myself. That one cut deep. At the time, I was already battling serious mental health struggles, and hearing those words from my own brother was devastating. Our father was always busy with work, and our mother never took my side. She even scolded me once, claiming it was my fault for irritating him. But things took a shocking turn in high school when David tried to set my hair on fire. Even then, my mother defended him, saying he was just playing around. It was my father who finally put his foot down. He threatened to call the police, and for the first time, David looked genuinely scared. My dad later admitted to me that he had hoped Ethan would grow out of his behavior, but he was finally realizing that my brother wasn't just mischievous, he was a full-blown bully. For the first time, I felt validated. I told my father everything, every insult, every humiliation, every act of cruelty. He was horrified. The very next day, he went to my school principal and made sure my bullies faced real consequences. That night, he enrolled me in MMA classes, telling me, "You need to stand up for yourself." I threw myself into training, balancing my studies with daily workouts. The transformation was unbelievable. One day, Ethan tried to steal my pocket money, the money I had been saving for months. I caught him just as he was about to cycle off with his friends. When I demanded it back, he sneered at me, taunting, "What are you going to do? Cry to Dad?" I didn't think. I just reacted. I punched him square in the face. David stumbled backward in shock, and I grabbed my money from his pocket before shoving him back down. He burst into tears, which would have been hilarious if not for the fact that my mother came rushing out to his defense. When she found out I had hit him, she scolded me, insisting that as the older brother, I needed to be a better role model. David, of course, looked smug, basking in the attention. She even complained to my father, expecting him to punish me. But my dad had had enough. He asked us both to explain, and when I told him David had stolen my money, my brother tried to justify it, saying, "I needed it for a date. As my brother, you should help me." My dad shut him down immediately. "You're lucky he only punched you. Anyone else would have called the police." David didn't like that. He threw a tantrum, hoping our mother would intervene, but this time Dad didn't back down. Realizing he wasn't going to get away with it, David screamed that he hated me and locked himself in his room. That was a turning point. He finally understood he couldn't physically overpower me anymore, and even Dad had stopped indulging him. But instead of changing, he just became more passive-aggressive. He muttered insults under his breath, refused to speak to me directly, and only communicated through our mother. I asked her repeatedly to help us resolve our issues, but she always refused. "I don't want to get involved," she would say. I longed to move out and leave it all behind, but little did I know, the worst was yet to come. When I cautiously broached the topic of David's hostility toward me, my mother would always dismiss it, brushing off my concerns as if they were unworthy of discussion. It was as if she refused to acknowledge that her favorite son could be anything less than perfect. Eventually, I left home for my dream university, earning a scholarship thanks to my academic excellence. My father was so proud that he threw me a celebratory party, and even my mother, who had always favored David, seemed happy for me. But David? He barely acknowledged my success, standing off to the side with an unreadable expression, as if my achievements meant nothing to him. The day I left was filled with excitement for the future, but, more importantly, relief. For the first time in my life, I could finally escape the toxic environment that had suffocated me for so long. The first few months at university were liberating. I made new friends, immersed myself in my studies, and slowly built a life separate from my dysfunctional past. The constant weight of David's insults and taunts lifted, allowing me to breathe freely for the first time. It was during my second year that I met Karen, a woman who would change the course of my life forever. We were introduced at a frat party by a mutual friend, and from that moment, everything changed. She was smart, kind, and effortlessly charming, and our connection was instant. Coming from a religious background, she held strong values regarding family and marriage. So, when we found out she was pregnant during our final year, we did what felt right. We got married immediately after graduation. Our wedding was small but filled with joy. Our family celebrated with us, and in that moment, I genuinely believed I had found my soulmate. I had always envisioned a monogamous relationship, a lifelong commitment with one woman to love and build a future with. Despite the occasional attention from other women over the years, I never strayed because I was content. Karen was everything I had ever wanted, and I had no reason to look elsewhere. But life has a cruel way of shattering illusions. I later discovered not just one betrayal, but two. Karen had engaged in a prolonged affair with a married coworker, a relationship that spanned several years. On top of that, she had a brief fling with an ex-boyfriend during a visit to her family. Some might call me naive for staying, and in hindsight, I can't entirely disagree. Both times we separated for a while, but I ultimately forgave her. I refused to let my son grow up in a broken home and convinced myself that we could work through it. Her first affair had happened when we were still young and reckless, and I convinced myself it was a one-time lapse in judgment. For a while, things improved, and I allowed myself to believe we had moved past it. Though I never fully regained my trust in her, I was determined to rebuild what we had. 4 years had passed since her last betrayal, and I thought we had finally reached a place of stability. Karen seemed committed to our marriage, and we were genuinely happy planning our future together. But 3 months ago, my world collapsed once again. With an almost eerie calmness, Karen dropped a confession that ripped my world apart. She had been having a long-term affair, and worse, our son might not even be mine. Her words sent shockwaves through me. I felt as if the ground had crumbled beneath my feet, leaving me suspended in a void of disbelief and betrayal. My mind struggled to process the weight of what she was saying. How long had she known? How could she keep something so life-altering from me? My voice was barely above a whisper when I demanded answers, desperate for some form of explanation. But Karen's reaction was disturbingly indifferent, as if she had long made peace with her choices. Her vague, evasive responses only deepened my confusion. Determined to uncover the truth, I pressed her further, insisting that I had a right to know the real father of the child I had raised as my own. And then she said it. David. His name left her lips like a death sentence. My brother's name felt like a punch to the gut. I could hardly believe what I was hearing. At first I thought she was joking, but the serious expression on her face told me otherwise. The nausea hit me instantly. I demanded an explanation, my hands shaking as I tried to grasp the horrifying reality of her words. Karen began unraveling a story that made me sick to my stomach. She explained that her affair with David had begun years ago, right after I first introduced her to my family. She had spent the holidays with us, staying from Thanksgiving until New Year's. At the time, David, who had always been cold and distant toward me, surprisingly showed warmth and charm around her. I was relieved, thinking that maybe he was finally making an effort to be civil. Karen, eager to integrate into my family, spent a lot of time with my mother and tried to bridge the gap between David and me. She often invited him to our outings, hoping it would help mend our strained relationship. I recalled the way she and David had played video games together and how they would laugh over shared jokes. But I had never suspected anything beyond that. Karen admitted that it had started with harmless flirtation, subtle and unnoticeable, but quickly escalated into something neither of them could stop. One night, they crossed a line that could never be undone. The thought of my wife and my brother together made me physically ill. Karen admitted she had felt guilty afterward, and had abruptly decided to leave for home before New Year's. I had tried to convince her to stay, but she had been adamant about going. Now, I understood why. 2 weeks later, we discovered she was pregnant. Karen admitted she wasn't sure if the baby was mine or David's, but she chose to stay with me, because I was the stable, responsible brother. That was the real reason we got married. Everything inside me shattered. The child I had loved, raised, and devoted my life to might not even be mine. I forced myself to ask if she was still involved with David, even now. After a long silence, she slowly nodded. She revealed that despite everything, she and David had never truly ended things. They had been meeting in secret for years. Hotels, fake business trips, stolen moments of passion. Half the time she claimed to be working late, she was with him. I asked her the question that haunted me the most. Why? If she truly wanted to be with David, why had she stayed with me? Karen wiped away her tears and admitted the truth. I was the safe option. David was the risk, but I was the stability she needed. She claimed to love me, said I was a great father, and insisted she never meant to hurt me. I stood there silent. Then, with a calmness that even surprised me, I told her I was leaving. Karen burst into tears, begging for another chance, saying we could work through this like we had before. When she realized I wasn't budging, she switched tactics, bringing up our son, saying divorce would destroy him, that we needed to keep our family together. I reminded her coldly that our son might not even be mine. She cried harder, calling me cruel. But I wasn't cruel, I was just done. Maybe she had assumed I would always forgive her. Maybe she thought nothing could push me past my breaking point. She was wrong. Ever since college, Karen had clung to the idea that we could somehow fix what was broken, but I couldn't bring myself to believe her anymore. Her words felt empty, like rehearsed lines in a play she no longer cared to perform. Trust had already crumbled, and even if I found it in me to forgive, I would never be able to forget, never erase the image of her and my own brother together. I had always believed in second chances, in the idea that people make mistakes because we are all flawed. But this was beyond redemption. Without another word, I left her sobbing on the doorstep and checked into a hotel, seeking refuge from the wreckage of my marriage. The next day I went straight to my parents. I laid everything bare, exposing the years of betrayal, the lies, the fact that my wife and my brother had been sneaking around behind my back. The look on their faces told me everything. Even my mother, who had always turned a blind eye to David's faults, was momentarily speechless. But true to her nature, she couldn't let go of her favoritism so easily. She immediately scrambled for an excuse, insisting that David would never do something so vile to his own brother. I wasn't about to let him slip away from this. Determined to bring the truth to light, I told my parents to remain silent while I called David right in front of them. I needed to hear him admit it, needed them to witness the man they had always put on a pedestal reveal his true self. I instructed them not to make a sound, to let him believe this was a private conversation. When David picked up, his voice was casual, almost indifferent. That changed the second I confronted him. At first, he played the innocent act, vehemently denying everything. He called me delusional, insisted Karen must have made up the entire story. But when I told him she had confessed, his tone shifted instantly. His anger turned to insults, directed not at himself, not even at me, but at Karen. She's a liar, a pathetic, characterless woman. You should be blaming her, not me, he spat, his voice dripping with arrogance. Then with a scoff he added, not my fault women are drawn to me. Maybe you should take a hard look at yourself, little brother. I've always been the better-looking one. That was it. The confirmation I needed. I let out a short, humorless laugh and calmly thanked him for admitting everything while our parents listened in stunned silence. There was a moment of dead air before David stammered, realizing what had just happened. His confidence wavered. Wait, what do you mean thanked? He asked, his voice suddenly uncertain. I could hear the panic creeping in. That was when my mother, still reeling from the shock, finally spoke. David, she said, her voice unsteady but laced with disappointment. Tell me he's lying. Tell me you didn't do this to your own brother. For the first time, David didn't have an immediate response. He stuttered through a weak excuse, trying to weave a new narrative where he was the victim. He blamed Karen, claimed she had seduced him, that he had tried to resist, but ultimately given in. He painted himself as the man caught in an unfortunate situation, shifting accountability at every turn. But my mother, who had always shielded him, always defended him, was looking at him differently now. There was no pride in her eyes, no motherly warmth, just a quiet, dawning realization that the son she had always favored wasn't the man she thought he was. In that charged moment, a strange sense of justice washed over me. After years of enduring David's cruelty, the tables had finally turned. He was no longer the one looking down on me. He was the one exposed, his shame laid bare for all to see. As David struggled to find his words, my father, usually composed and measured, couldn't hide his disappointment. He reached for the phone and with a heavy sigh, addressed my brother. David, he began, his voice thick with restrained anger. What you've done isn't just a betrayal of your brother. It's a betrayal of this entire family. You carried on an affair with his wife for years, even after they were married. Do you understand the gravity of your actions? You've destroyed the trust that holds this family together. He let his words hang in the air, allowing the weight of them to sink in before continuing. I raised you both to value loyalty and decency, but today, you've shown me that you have neither. You've disrespected your own brother, disregarded his pain, and acted without a shred of remorse. Your mother and I may have enabled your behavior for too long, but that ends now. As of this moment, you're cut off. No more college fund, no more financial support. You will pay for your own education and your own lifestyle from now on. Let's see how much of a man you are without my money propping you up. Through it all, I remained composed, even though part of me had wanted to scream at David. But watching my father deliver the punishment himself was more satisfying than any revenge I could have planned. David had always assumed he could get away with anything, but this time, his arrogance had real consequences. My mother, despite her usual instinct to protect him, struggled to defend him this time. Even when David protested, trying to paint himself as the victim, my father refused to hear another word. He ended the call abruptly, silencing any further excuses. Afterward, my mother approached me, her face filled with an emotion I hadn't seen in years, genuine remorse. She pulled me into an embrace, something that hadn't happened in a long time, but in that silent moment, I felt an unspoken acknowledgement. She finally saw the truth, and for the first time, she was on my side. Following that conversation, my father helped me find a good lawyer to handle my divorce. Karen and her attorney fought tooth and nail, demanding alimony since I earned more, but her infidelity worked in my favor. As part of the proceedings, we conducted a paternity test, and the results shattered me. David was, in fact, the biological father of the child I had raised as my own. The revelation crushed me. The betrayal had already been unbearable, but now I had to face the reality that the boy I had loved, the child I thought was mine, wasn't actually my son. The anger and pain that followed were almost worse than discovering Karen's affair. She pleaded with me to stay involved in the child's life, arguing that he shouldn't suffer for their mistakes, but I just couldn't do it. Every time I looked at him, I saw David, and I hated it. Once the divorce was finalized, a sense of relief swept over me. I moved into my own place, a bachelor pad that felt foreign yet freeing. I had married young and never truly lived alone, but surprisingly, I adapted quickly. For the first time in years, I had full control over my life, and I savored the independence. 2 weeks ago, my father called with unexpected news. He had made a decision about his will, one that would permanently sever David from the family's future. "I'm not leaving him a cent," my father declared. "He'll get exactly $1 to ensure he can't contest it in court." I was stunned. My father had worked hard his entire life, and his estate, including his assets, retirement fund, and life insurance, was worth nearly $2 million. His only condition was that if he passed before my mother, she would continue living in the house, though ownership would transfer to me. I had no issue with this. I wanted my mother to be cared for, no matter what. Somehow, David found out about this decision, and with no way to reach our parents, he called me yesterday. His voice dripped with forced sincerity as he tried to play the victim. He confessed that he was struggling to pay for college and that Karen, upon learning the paternity results, had started pressuring him for child support. Panicked and desperate, he admitted that he was drowning financially and couldn't find a decent part-time job. For the first time in his life, David was facing real consequences, and he had no idea how to handle it. He pleaded with me to convince our parents to give him another chance, swearing that he had changed and needed my help. I let out a bitter laugh and told him I was done. He had years to consider the consequences of his actions before sleeping with my wife and fathering her child. He had made his choices, and now he had to live with them. David insisted that I was being unfair, claiming that Karen was just as guilty. I didn't argue. I simply reminded him that I had divorced her, meaning she was his problem now. If he was struggling, that was between him, Karen, and the mess they had created together. He had no right to drag me into it. When he raised his voice in frustration, I cut him off. "You're not the golden boy anymore, David. You're the disgrace who betrayed his own brother." At that moment, his tough act crumbled. He broke down, sobbing, admitting that everyone, including our grandparents and extended family, had turned their backs on him. While I knew this was true, it wasn't my burden to bear. I gave him one final warning. He was no longer my brother in my eyes, and he was never to contact me again. Then I hung up, severing the last thread that connected us. Since then, I've replayed that conversation over and over in my mind. Despite everything, I had never heard David cry. Not since we were kids. I won't lie. Seeing him so helpless did stir something inside me. But does that mean I should step in and talk to our parents about him? Or would I just be a fool for even considering it? Update 1. Hey everyone. A lot of you have been asking why I'm no longer in contact with my son Henry, and some have even called me heartless for cutting him out of my life. I need to explain something. I'm not comfortable raising another man's child. This isn't just a stepchild situation. I was deceived into believing Henry was mine, only to later discover that he was actually my brother's son. That revelation shattered me. I spent days crying over it, struggling with the pain, but the biggest reason I've distanced myself is Karen. If I maintain any connection with Henry, she'll have an excuse to keep forcing her way back into my life, and I refuse to let that happen. Some of you might think I'm being selfish or cruel, but I have to protect my own peace. Maybe someday, when enough time has passed, I'll feel differently. But for now, I can't do it. Update 2. Most of you correctly guessed it. My mother was the one who told David about our dad changing his will. That's why he called me, hoping I'd help him fix things. When I confronted her about it in front of my father, she broke down, insisting that I had punished David enough and that he had learned his lesson. But my father wasn't having it. His voice was cold as he told her, "If you think what David did is forgivable, then maybe you should go live with him, because I never will." That threat shut her up instantly. My father made it clear, if she ever spoke to David again and we found out, she could pack her bags and leave. And knowing how stubborn my dad is, I don't doubt that he would follow through. I hope my mother finally understands that some betrayals can't be undone. Update 3. Reddit. It's been 5 months since my last update, and a lot has changed. My relationship with my parents has grown stronger. My dad and I even go golfing every weekend now. It's weird, but in a good way. He treats me more like a friend than just his son, and honestly, I appreciate it. As for my mother, she still misses David, but she has respected my father's ultimatum and kept her distance. The last I heard about David was from a cousin. Apparently, he ran out of people to ask for money and had to drop out of college. He and Karen are now living together, and he's working part-time as a mechanic. From what I hear, they're raising Henry together. I guess that's for the best. My parents and I never bring up David, and I prefer it that way. For those wondering about me, I'm doing well. I got promoted 2 months ago, which came with a huge salary increase. I'm not dating anyone yet. I think I still need time to heal. I've been going to therapy though, so we'll see how that goes. Thank you all for following my story. If you haven't subscribed yet, be sure to hit the notification bell for more shocking real-life stories.